conscious home design ended up being uh, a methodology that I cultivated and developed over these 20 years of practice. And it's not about style. You can have a modern home, or you can have a classic home, or a mid-century home, or a rustic home, or, anything in between, cottage or a castle, whatever style you want anywhere in the world. Conscious home design is really about making sure that whatever space you have is curated in such a way that it's actually going to help you step into the next version of yourself, create the next version of yourself, whatever that looks like for you.
Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Today's conversation is all about what happens when we bring the things that we talk about on this podcast, awareness, intention, alignment, out of the head and into the home. And I'm excited about this conversation. I am joined by Talor Stewart, a licensed architect with over 25 years of experience and the author of Conscious Home Design, a #1 bestseller in 7 countries. And Talor works with individuals and communities around the world to design homes that don't just look beautiful, but actively support how people live, feel, and relate. And to me, I don't know how y'all feel about home design. I get very overwhelmed with decorative choices. But the idea of creating a space that is supporting what my aim is in life, to be more conscious and aware, really felt brilliant to me. So this conversation is all about what happens when your space starts working with you instead of against you. So welcome, Talor.
Thank you, Abby. I just want to start by saying what a hero you are. That was incredible. I really loved your opening thoughts there. The exact wording, I don't have a photographic memory here, but your exact wording of out of the mind and into the home or into the thing is, no one's ever said it quite that way before. And it really struck me as like, oh, that's a light bulb, that's an insight moment there. Cause that's really what it is. It's taking all of these theories and proofs and facts that we know, but making it real, applying it in our own life and in such a tangible way, such a physical way that we're getting an actual environmental feedback from it. So that is what conscious home design is at a core essence level. Yeah. But then going on with anyway, you said so many beautiful things there, but thank you for having me on the show. I'm really looking forward to a stimulating conversation. I think everyone can enjoy and get value from this, even if they have no plans to hire an architect or build a new home or renovate their home, even if they're just living in a rental. There's still things that we can do to support the mind-body environment connection, little shifts that actually have a big impact. So
yeah,
excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about that as well, because, I think for me, I just sort of resigned myself because we bought here sight unseen, as you and I talked about in our pre-conversation. And so for me, I've kind of treated this house as a rental, and just in my mind have just sort of been like, well, when we move, when this, when that. And so reading through your workbook and chatting with you and stuff is sort of reinvigorated. Well, wait a minute, there's small things I can do. How brilliant is that? But to your point as well, absolutely. And I talk about that a lot. We get into our head about all this stuff, right? And about mindfulness and spirituality and all the things. And there's a lot of theory. But one of the things that I talk on this podcast a lot about, it's all about boots on the ground. How do we live in the human body in 3D? Dr. Joe always says 1 foot in 5D, 1 foot in 3D. A lot of times we forget that we are in 3D. And so how can we bridge those gaps? And so this idea of conscious living in the home, to me, is really exciting. How did you get there, by the way? Because you started as an architect. You are an architect. You didn't start. You continue to be an architect. How did you come into conscious living as opposed to the math of it?
Sure. So I was the way I am before I was an architect, right? So I came to life. I came to architecture with sort of a optimistic outlook, a hopeful life, a person who looks for possibilities and potential, someone who wants to stretch into their greater self, recognizing that that core behind that is feeling like I'm somehow in tune or in harmony with the rhythm of life and the flow of life. And so that sort of deep personal desire for my own practice of mindfulness, of meditation, of trying to live an intentional lifestyle, healthy eating, personal development, growth things, all that personal stuff sort of helps frame my lens of architecture. The term conscious home design comes back from one of my old college papers. When I was studying architecture formally in Boston back in the 1990s, I was struck by how intentional architecture is. Like, architects are very focused on why they're building this way. And, there's an answer for everything. We're doing this because of this and this. And, and yet with all that intentionality, it still felt unconscious. It was so focused on the style or the materials and how we're going to bolt
Yeah.
them together and stuff. It was very tectonic. And obviously every architect wants their building, their creation to be useful for people.
Right.
But academia especially is theoretical. And so it's more about exploring these styles and these concepts of placemaking and shaping, and less about the actual people using the spaces. And so for me, I was like, it's highly intentional, but it's unconscious. And so I was talking about unconscious design in one of my papers. And so 20 years later, fast forward, when I'm writing my own book, to share what I've learned over the past couple of decades with the non-design community, I wrote a very easy to read book for people considering how can they make their home fit their lifestyle better. Conscious Home Design was the title that I ended up with. And I incorporated my business with that name too. So conscioushome.com is also my company.
I love that. I love that distinction between intentionality and consciousness, because I was just talking about this yesterday with a couple of different clients, but it goes back to what I call sophisticated sleepwalking, where it's so sophisticated because we think it has intention,
My
right?
God, that's beautiful.
But it's unconscious. It's like it's an
Yeah.
intention, but it's a habit, right? So in my world, obviously it's different than architecture, but the metaphor kind of works. If you feel like you are, well, I've got to do this because this person's upset with me, so I have to do that. And so you're very intentionally saying, I'm going to do this to make this right, but it's totally unconscious because you don't realize that you're betraying yourself in the process. But that's the habit, right? So I love this idea of it's intentional, but we can be very intentional and still be completely unconscious and not really know why we're doing what we're doing, or open the landscape up to be like, well, what more is possible here?
There's something you said, another one of your comments in your opening remarks on the podcast here. You talked about wanting to be more conscious with your space, but being overwhelmed with so many choices and what direction you go in and what's going to actually move the needle and how do you prioritize. And we're drowning in a sea of Pinterest and Instagram photos and suggestions and little how-to tip articles and, the 7 best things you should do for peace in the home and all sorts of little things that people are publishing these days. And there's some good stuff out there, but how do you actually create something, a framework that's usable and measurable, right? It's a very haphazard sort of spray and hope approach if you're trying to go out there. And so conscious home design ended up being a methodology that I cultivated and developed over these 20 years of practice. And it's not about style. You can have a modern home, or you can have a classic home, or a mid-century home, or a rustic home, or anything in between, cottage or a castle, whatever style you want, anywhere in the world. Conscious home design is really about making sure that whatever space you have is curated in such a way that it's actually going to help you step into the next version of yourself, create the next version of yourself, whatever that looks like for you. So it's a highly personalized but invisible way. It's not a style where if you were driving down the street, you would look at a house and go, oh, that's a conscious home design house. It's completely invisible like that. It blends in, it fits with everything. So when I published the book, I didn't want to be just another style guide, another, thing that people figure out, oh yeah, I like black and white. No, I like red and blue, like whatever it is. It's not about that. those things matter. Those things are important. Your style definitely matters. And as an architect, I assume that you're going to get, in the end, the style you want. But first, before we are focusing on the details of that, we want to make sure that we get the form and the function that you need.
Mm.
Because having the most beautiful pair of shoes, if they're three sizes too small or too large, isn't going to serve you well, right? So
Right.
we want to make sure that your home is going to fit you. And I'm not talking about just having the right amount of bedrooms. I'm talking about the not just caring for the body. Is much more than shelter. It's about cultivating and developing our higher needs as well as our physical needs. So that's the framework that I looked at. I was drawing on things from science, scientific first principles, studies from NASA and Harvard and Georgetown and other universities, University of Madrid, for example, and lots of data that I could say, what is true fundamentally for all humans? What do we know moves the needle? And let's start there and then ask the questions, what would that look like for you? Because the quality of your question determines the quality of your outcome. And so I wanted to make sure that we were asking the right questions on how to help you not have that decision fatigue, not figure out, I don't know if I want this one or that one. They both look beautiful, but which one's actually going to serve? And so the framework is like creating a measuring stick against which all design choices can be compared to say, does this tie in with what we know and what we said we wanted to prioritize based on what our actual goals are? And so with a framework like that, you can actually very quickly and judiciously and effectively make good choices.
So is that where the workbook comes in? You talk in the workbook about 3 different kinds of relationships.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, and bringing that into home design. So speak to that. Tell us about what the 3 different kinds of relationships that we have are and how that has anything to do with home design.
Sure. So the book, I wrote it so that it could be read in about an hour. It's very accessible. There's not a lot of jargon in there. I'm not speaking, designer ease. It's, some sort of architectese, jargon. It's just, it's the big idea. Have you seen that? I saw a video once where someone took like a big jar, and then I think it was like a high school teacher or something, and he had this jar, and then he had a bunch of rocks and some pebbles and some sand, and if he put all the sand in there, then there was no room for the rocks at the end, and so then when you put the rocks in first and then some pebbles, then the sand, there's room for everybody because the way it fits, and so when I wrote Conscious Home Design, I wanted to fill it with just the rocks, and so and to tell people, look, people aren't going to become an architect. They don't need to know everything I need to know. I know. They just need to know the things that actually really, really matter as it relates to them. And so it's the big idea that the rocks are put in there in the book in 12 quick chapters. It's like, here's the stuff that makes a difference. That's the concept. And the relationships are in there as well. But then what would that look like for you as an individual? That's what the workbook is about. And so I hired someone who has a dual master's degree in social work and psychotherapy. And this person actively works as a counselor and consults with people. And so I read the book, and together we went through and said, I want to make sure that we're asking people those good questions. They're going to pull out the real answers. They'll think a little bit. It'll be fun, but also thought-provoking, and it will help them find what's true for them and write it out on these little exercises and fun worksheets. And so the relationship piece, that's built on the Harvard study, which told us that after following people for their entire life, thousands of individuals, they discovered that regardless of ups and downs in life, health challenges, business success or failures, whether they had a big fancy home or a very modest home, they found that while all those things matter, the single biggest predictor of our happiness and our life expectancy, even our longevity, was the quality of our relationships. And so that made me really look at relationships, because if it's the single biggest predictor of our happiness and our longevity, then architecture needs to prioritize relationships in its approach to shaping the environment, because the highest calling of architecture is to help people live happily ever after. It's to help people live their best life, right? Architecture is about people, A lot of architects, I don't want to talk bad about the profession, but too many of my colleagues are focused on buildings.
Yes.
I argue that architecture is not about buildings. Buildings is just the medium. To me, saying architecture is about buildings is like saying books are about
Right.
paper and ink. It's like,
Right.
no, they're not. Books are about the story and the experience that the human being is going to get from reading it. The paper and ink is the medium, and the building is just the medium to facilitate an experience for
Mm.
human beings. So that's sort of, the whole backstory there for going into the relationships, right? And so thanks for letting me take that detour.
Yeah.
If I just tell people what without giving them the why, it doesn't stick and they're less likely to actually take it to heart and maybe even do something about it. So I really want people to have that 10,000 foot overview before we zoom in on
So
the
true. Yes.
details.
Thank
Yeah.
you for taking the detour. Yeah.
Great. So the relationships. So the Harvard study was actually very clear. They said, hey, relationships is certainly not limited to a romantic partnership. So, if you're single, you can still live a long, happy, fulfilled life. It includes all of your relationships. Maybe just that person down at the corner store that you go on Saturdays for your morning cup of coffee and a newspaper. You might not even know their name, but you recognize their face, and maybe they recognize you, and maybe they even remember how you like your coffee, and they can ask you, hey, you want the same thing you had the usual or whatever. And it's like, that's a relationship. And those kind of connections, the small ones and the big, deep, big, meaningful ones, they all are valuable to us, and they have different levels of enrichment that we need as people. Everyone finds their own balance for relationships. Yeah. Whether you're introvert or extrovert or whatever. But as an architect, looking for a methodology, looking for a way that I could quantify things and measure it so I could help, again, creating that benchmark of, hey, how do we tie in and make sure that this is in keeping with what we say we want? I had to break down relationships into categories, into something that I could plan for and work around. And so as I studied all the different kinds of relationships, the Greeks have 7 different words for love, depending on how it shows up. Is it agape or storge or eros or filial, depending on if it's between a parent and their child, or a person in their community, or 2 best friends, or between lovers, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many different kinds of relationship, much more than just the 7 identified by the Greeks. And I found that all of them are going to somehow fall into one of 3 broad categories, and those are giving, receiving, and reciprocal. So giving relationships are the ones where we show up as their primary giver. Those are ones that we have with anyone that we're teaching or coaching or mentoring, children, or that we're either teaching or parenting or babysitting. And that is also going to extend our giving relationships to those we might have with any plants and animals around, whether they're our pets or whether it's a bird feeder out in your yard. That's a giving relationship that you've initiated. And so our reciprocal relationships are like you and I are having right now. It's just 2 people showing up and having a conversation. No one has to have their role model face on as they would if they were parenting. So you can sort of let your hair down and talk from the heart. It's a little more organic and informal. And so these are relationships that we're going to have with friends, colleagues, peers, that kind of thing. And then our receiving relationships are the ones where we are the primary beneficiary of someone else's love and care and wisdom. And so relationships that we have with our elders and ancestors, with our teachers, mentors, even our heroes or spiritual figures, whoever we're getting inspiration from, love, encouragement, knowledge, anyone who wants the best for us and is saying, hey, I believe in you. Those
Yeah.
are receiving relationships. Yeah. And so to be a well-rounded person, to develop yourself fully, you want to have a healthy balance of all 3 kinds. In college, for example, you probably have tons of receiving relationships with all your professors. And in any spare time you have, we're hanging out with our friends and our peers, a lot of reciprocal relationships. But that time of life, there's not a lot of giving relationships for
Right.
most people at that age, which is fine. It is what it is. It's a cycle. There's ebbs and flows at different stages of life. But soon thereafter, most people start families. They settle down, and then they got young children, and it's just giving 24/7 for years, it feels like. And so as we go through life, we're going to experience different proportions, but on the total, we want to have all 3 kinds of relationship. So in conscious home design, I said, what would it look like if we intentionally created space in the home? Because we're spending more than half of our lives in our homes. So it really has an impact on us. Like, what does it look like if we built consciously to support all three kinds of relationship, giving, the receiving, and the reciprocal relationships? Is it possible? What would it look
Yeah.
like, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And so, how does someone begin to actually bring their own particular bent of that into their home? Like, what are some
Right.
examples?
Sure, sure. So I took it one step further and asked myself, what would it look like if we created opportunities for all three kinds of relationship, not just in the home, but in every room of the home? Rather than just saying, hey, the kitchen is a giving place and the family room is a reciprocal place, you know, rather than dedicating different spaces to different types of relationship, let's create opportunities for all three kinds of relationship in every room of the house. And so this is really where the rubber meets the road. You know, this is where we're taking this big idea and translating and saying, what does that actually look like in
Yeah.
something, you know, to your question here. A great example of what this could look like is to use a room that people typically do not think of as a relationship room at all, and that's the bathroom. The bathroom is typically thought of as a personal space, a private space. It's where you go to be alone and just take care of the body, do your business. It also can be a place to get away for a minute and catch your breath. You know, if you're at a party and you happen to be an introvert, you know, or if you do have young kids and they're clinging to your leg all the time and you just I need 5 minutes to take a breath. The bathroom can be a refuge, yeah. But it's also extremely fertile ground to reaffirm your connection, your sense of connection. And so examples of giving relationship in the bathroom. I think especially if you have an outside window, you can certainly put a couple of plants in there. Put them on the windowsill, or if the windowsill is too small, you know, maybe hang them from the top, or put a small shelf nearby where the plants can get some light. If you don't have an outside window, then put in a full spectrum light bulb. There are plenty of plants that can grow just fine with a full spectrum bulb. Not a daylight bulb. It has to be full spectrum bulb. The plants will do better under a full spectrum bulb. And it's also more pleasant on you too.
Right.
Those daylight bulbs are a little bright, but the full spectrum bulbs are a little more, they look more natural to the eye. And so not only does this set up a very tiny, low maintenance giving relationship, right? I mean, just once a week, take 3 steps from the
Faucet.
sink over to
Yeah.
the plant and give it some water,
Yeah.
prune off a dead leaf or something. But it also sets up a physiological benefit as well, because we didn't evolve. Our bodies didn't grow. We didn't, you know, humanity didn't evolve in buildings. Most of our history is much closer to nature and the earth. And we know this because it shows up in the way we respond to buildings versus nature. And so you can take 1,000 people and show them a picture of some beautiful architecture, and it can be beautiful. I mean, it could be, you know, Buckingham Palace, and everyone could look at that and say, "Wow, that's quite beautiful." Not my style. I wouldn't want that for my home. You know, it's too ornate and too fancy. People have different preferences,
Yeah.
but those 1,000 people, they're going to look at that building, and although they might all agree that it is in fact a beautiful design, they're not going to have the same physiological response to seeing that. Whereas if you take 1,000 people and you show them a nature scene, you know, just some green plants, like some green growing things, physiologically, the brain waves calm
Shift.
and our breath becomes more deep, you know, less shallow, and we achieve a resting heart rate more quickly, you know, and that can lead to lowered blood pressure. And so seeing plants, seeing green growing things, it sends a cue to the body, hey, you're in your natural environment. You're
Yeah.
safe. Things
Yeah.
are normal.
Yeah.
And when you're in a building, no matter how beautiful it is, the environment is not sending subtle cues back to you saying you're safe, you're in your natural habitat, everything is normal. It's no matter how beautiful it is, it's still sending signals of stress. Hey, you're out of your element. So by putting plants in your home, when you look at them, it automatically, and you don't have to think about it, this happens unconsciously, you know, so the more the better. Stick them in there, you know, because it's going to help you just live in a state of more ease and relaxation. So there's a double benefit to putting plants in the bathroom. If, you know, for example, put them anywhere you want to, but you could put a plant in your bathroom, and that's going to help start not just the giving relationship, but also these other benefits.
And what if
Take
you can't keep plants alive?
What if you can't keep them alive?
What if you're like a person
Then
that's
get
like
some new ones.
obsessed with
Plants
plants?
plants are cheap and they're abundant. That's, they sell them at the garden supply and home improvement stores all year round, and certainly in the springtime. Just come up with a new $300 budget every year for new plants,
And
you
is
know.
flowers the same? So would you then recommend also having
Sure.
fresh flowers in your
Yeah.
house?
If it's growing, yeah. If it's
Hmm.
green colored and it grows, get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I know you use like Maslow's hierarchy
Sure.
and the 9 essential spaces. What is that? Tell us more about how that
Sure.
you use that in your framework.
Sure. We're not just animals, right? You can give us shelter. You can give, the basic program of a shelter of what people are calling a home, but maybe isn't really a home, is like, hey, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, hangout space, right?
Yeah.
It's like basically 4 functions. Think of a 1 bedroom apartment. That's what it has. And homes are just that, but with more bedrooms, typically. If you're lucky, we take one of those bedrooms and turn it into an office or to a study or a separate TV room from the family room so that people can multitask. But the program doesn't really change from there in traditional design. And we're still designing architecture with programs that are by and large the same as they were 100 years ago. We haven't,
Mhm.
architecture has not incorporated all the stuff that all the other disciplines, all the other professions of psychology, of physical science, of, the what we know from about human excellence, whether it's from personal trainers at the Olympics, about the mind body connection and diet, and all, I mean, just so many different fields that have explored and grown. But that information is not being incorporated deep enough or fast enough into architecture. And so that's the work of conscious home design, is to do that. And so one of the things I recognize is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs pyramid that says we're more than just bodies. And so sure, you can give it a place to sleep.
Right.
You can give and keep the body clean with a bathroom. That certainly is a big advance forward, indoor plumbing and hot
Right.
water, right? That's certainly, sanitation has increased life expectancy. And kitchens have increased life expectancy as well too. When we can prepare our own food cleanly, boom, okay, we live longer, but that helps us live. It helps us survive, but it's not going to guarantee
Thrive.
that we're going to thrive,
Right.
right? And thriving is what we really want. I mean, even the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence said life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. This is fundamental, and we recognize this as inalienable and fundamental right of being alive. Yeah. And so here we are trying to create happiness, but we're spending all of our times in our homes, and really we're building our homes for survival
Ah,
and not for happiness. And so I said, well, what can we do to help people be more happy? And so we have the Harvard study. We know that relationships is number one. But according to Maslow, so that falls into our love and belonging needs, right? The
mhm.
connection. But Maslow also says we have personal development needs. We all want to feel like we're good at something, like we've accomplished something. And whether it's just, hey, I'm good at it as a hobby, not to be competitive in the marketplace, but just to feel competency at something. There's a sense of satisfaction and a sense of value that we derive from being good at something or knowing a lot about something. We also have creative expression needs, and these are universal, and they may or may not have been nourished in everyone. Your parents may have said, no, you're not going to be an artist, you're going to be a lawyer, that kind of thing, or no, you're not going to paint, you're going to play the piano, because they had some vision of that. And so you may have been directed, misguided, or squashed, or whatever, but we're all born with innate creative desire,
Yeah.
to be creative in some way, whether it shows up in gardening or cooking or journaling or podcasting or whatever it is. We are essentially creative beings. And so in conscious home design, I want to say, let's make sure that we're asking that question. Hey, what do you like to do for creative activity? What's a creative expression that shows up for you, or has shown up for you in the past, that really fed you? Something that nurtured you, something that when you did it, you felt a little more glow, a little more shine, in
Mhm.
your aura. Yeah. Because if we don't plan for that in your life, you might not get to do that in your life.
Mm.
Right? Like, I like to talk about the Mona Lisa. It's the most famous painting in the world. Everyone's heard of it by now. It's 500 years old. Leonardo da Vinci painted it in the early 1500s. It took him more than a decade to finish that painting. And when I read that factoid, I thought, oh my God, that's it right there. That's just illustrating the whole point of what I believe as an architect is that, Seth Godin said that it takes 10,000 hours to get expert status at most things. And some things are more complicated, some things are less complicated. But a rule of thumb is, hey, if you do 10,000 hours into a certain area of expertise, then you're going to get sort of master level mastery compared to general
Yeah.
population. And so that makes sense. We all know, hey, it takes time and effort to become good at anything. Practice makes perfect. But what's missing from that common sense formula is that in addition to time and effort, it also takes space. Because if you don't have space, an environment in which to do those things, to put in the time and the effort, then you're fighting against the stream, against the current. And so Leonardo da Vinci, when he was uninspired or was called away to do other work, the Mona Lisa was on hold. It was sitting there in his art studio, just waiting. But if he didn't have an art studio, a place dedicated for him to do creative work, then the Mona Lisa might never have been finished. Architecture allows us to create the future. If we didn't have architecture, the ability to control our environment, we wouldn't be able to create anything that took longer than a sunny afternoon. Because as soon as the weather changed or night came and hostile tribes or wild animals came, it just messed everything up, And so all of our advancements in art and science, technology, medicine, whatever, are in large part due to our ability to control our environment. Architecture allows humanity, whether as a whole, but also as an individual, to build on yesterday's achievements.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are interested in personal development. They're interested in, I think emotional freedom is not talked enough nearly about, but it's one of my highest values.
Mm-hmm.
And creativity. What are some things? What are the concrete things? Like if you're looking at personal development, how do you create a home space that is helping with that? Like what does that translate into literally in the home?
Yeah. So we touched on the relationships, just the beginning piece of it, the giving relationships in the bathroom. We can also do reciprocal and receiving relationships in the bathroom and throughout the home. The workbook is really about doing a self-assessment. Everyone is going to have areas in their home where they're well supported. Certain relationships or certain activities are going to be, well supported, but others, there may be gaps. And you as an individual, each person needs to do their own self-assessment, go through their home. Look, do I have opportunities for giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships? Where am I well supported? Where could I be better supported? Is that okay? Do I like it this way or do I want to make a shift? And if so, here's what we can do. Let's call in this opportunity for this type of relationship. It's the same thing with our personal development goals. If you say, well, I have a goal to have this sort of physical movement routine, whether it's Tai Chi or yoga or martial arts or lifting weights or for a training for a half marathon or whatever your thing is, it's a physical activity goal. You might look around your house and say, do I have any opportunities to move my body in my home? And if not, where could you do that? Is there a way you can set up and dedicate space? Because if your exercise equipment is in the closet or is in the storage shelf up in the garage, then you're going to have a hard time maintaining that sort of New Year's resolution goal of keeping it, of doing it, because there's a lot of friction involved to getting the equipment out and setting it up and then using it and then putting it away, every time. If you're pressed for time and you only have 10 minutes, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have it all set up right there and ready to go and all you have is 10 minutes, well, 10 minutes may not be the 45 minutes that you promised yourself, but 10 minutes that you just step on and do it and then you step off. And so while it's not everything you hoped for, it's something. And every little step we take in the direction of our goals and our dreams sets up this positive feedback loop that says, you know what, my life is possible. The things that matter to me are achievable. And maybe not perfection, but I can still move in that direction. It's not all or nothing. Conscious home design doesn't say you have to have the very best or it's pointless. It's going to meet you where you are. And so that's just one example. Another person may say, no, actually, what I wanted to do was start journaling because there's so much on my mind and so much in my heart. And I've just been collecting it for years and I'm not able to tell it. And when I type, it doesn't feel right. And so I want to write it out by hand. That could be someone's goal. And so, okay, great. How can architecture support that for you? Well, is there a place in your home that's inspiring for you? Is there a place perhaps with a view of some plants, or if you don't have a view to the outside that's nice to look at, can you set up a nice little place in your home that you like to be, that perhaps has a sunny window coming in, something that when you're there in that space you feel a lift, and it helps get you into flow state a little bit more easily. Because if you're not in the habit of writing and your body doesn't have this sort of muscle memory and you don't have this automatic thing that happens, there's a little bit of a friction, a little bit of a hurdle to get over to start writing and to develop and establish a habit. And so if you can create a welcoming environment, then it removes a friction point. All you have to do is step in there. And when you sit down to do your thing, or stand up to do your thing, or whatever it is your thing is, once you're in that place, it helps get you in the zone, and helps, it gives you a lift into it. So that's, the mind body environment connection in service of you.
Mm-hmm. And so how about couples or people, they'll fight in the kitchen or over, right? Like, how do you, because I do couples coaching, how do you support the relationships inside the household, particularly these days? There's a lot of tension. What are things people can do to support harmony in their household that, like you said, it's not even necessarily conscious, but if someone listening wanted to be like, oh, I think I'm just going to plant some things around here to subconsciously set this space for more harmony, what would you suggest?
There's so many things, Abby, like with the personal development activities or cures or fixes for the space. Everyone needs to do a self-assessment. You mentioned, just hypothetically, for example, arguing in the kitchen as a place. Someone else, they may be arguing at the front entry because it's not big enough for all their shoes and coats and gear and stuff. It always feels cluttered and tangled, It's inherently a high friction spot. Someone else maybe the friction, the crabbing may come out at the bathroom because there's not enough room for two people in there, and there's, they have to take turns, or one person has a different level of tidiness than another. I mean, people need to assess where their key friction points are.
Yeah, I told you, for me, it's my husband's obsession with the cat. So he uses cardboard boxes to furnish the house because he gets a kick out of the cat. And so I'm in the living room and like, can we not furnish the house with cardboard? Right.
Yeah.
So to your point, everybody has different places.
And so people will need to sort of look and say, where are my worst points? Is there anything I can do to alleviate some of the friction there? And so sometimes it's about having a size appropriate space. If you have 6 people coming home into a tiny little 6x6 mudroom, that's not enough space for 6 people to come in. And if people are coming in with bags of groceries or handbags and keys and wallets and phones that need charging and backpacks and boots, it's a lot. So you need to have a size appropriate space with the right amount of storage so that you can support, so that not only the humans, but also all the paraphernalia that we have, all of our accoutrements, can also be well received. People might not be lazy. It might just be that there's not a place for that thing that they have. And so it's left out, and it contributes to clutter. It's not their fault. It's the architecture's. It's a problem with the architecture. Sometimes storage solutions can be found. Sometimes the best thing is to try to do a renovation or move to a new home. People need to make their choices, figure out what their trade-offs in life are going to be. Something can be done in every space depending on what it is for you and your husband. I would say, well, there are tons of people out there who are just obsessed with their cats, and they create beautiful cat jungle gyms. Like, they take a whole wall, and there's very elegant, beautiful cat gymnasiums that are done with nice wood and carpet. And so it looks like a sculpture. It's beautiful to look at. If you care enough, you could do that. You could create habitat that is actually aesthetically pleasing. It sounds like you care more than your husband. He's content with a cardboard box.
Yeah, or just a Costco cat tree that's in the middle of the living room. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, just do a little Google search or get on Pinterest, and look at some boards for cat habitat. I mean, you're going to be blown away with some of the stuff that's out there. It's really fun.
Interesting.
So you could and go and look at that and make your own Pinterest board if you want, or some sort of collage, or download images you see on Instagram about cat habitat and look at them all, assemble them, and run them by your husband. Hey, what do you think? What do you think of any of these? Do they look fun? Do you have any interest in doing some of this? I would like to do something. Would you help me? Do you want to do this as an activity together? It could potentially be a relationship building exercise.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like real alchemy is taking a friction point and turning it into a magnet point.
Yeah.
Sure. It's something that residential architects deal with commonly, is balancing the ticket. We don't want to have Castle Grayskull, nor do we want to have Barbie Dream Palace. You need to have a space that two people from different sort of comfort levels or aesthetics, let's say, are going to resonate with, right? And so this comes out a lot in bedrooms, like
Mhm.
a bedroom that doesn't feel too masculine, but also doesn't feel too feminine. I'm talking about a hetero couple here, but even in a same sex couple, there may be differences of opinion in terms of style or mood that people want. And so finding a way to create common ground with things that work for both, is a process, but it can be a fun experience. That it just takes a little bit of communication, honesty, and the courage to be honest, and also the courage to listen without trying to prevent or cut the other person off, to allow them to actually say what they're going to say, whether you like to hear it or not. Right? It takes
Yeah.
courage on both parts. Honesty. This is relationship stuff, right? I'm an architect, for goodness
Right.
sake.
No, I
I'm
know
not
what
a
my answer is.
therapist
Right.
or a coach. Yeah,
Right. But
like
it's
that.
interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's kind of some of the work that I do, but creating a space, because sometimes it's very tense for some people to talk. They're not
Yeah.
great at talking. And so I'm thinking like fountains or like a nice water fountain or something in the background, or something that's like a calming,
Mm-hmm.
soothing sound
Mm-hmm.
that just subconsciously, to your point, like helps people have discussions, or just
Yes.
not
Sure.
feel so fearful about having that discussion.
Right. So, I mean, trust is more important than environment in this kind of thing. Yes, if you can get out of if your environment is causing you stress, if your cortisol levels are elevated because it's the mess of your home, and it's not working for you, or it's just I hate that orange wall, or whatever it is, then getting into a different environment that feels safer or more peaceful, or is just different, that can set up different changes in the mind. Sometimes it's good, if you want to create a shift, to just relocate temporarily, get yourself into a different setting to do that work. That's why people go on retreats and pilgrimages and things like that. It can be very helpful. But starting with that trust, that's the most helpful thing, because a deep trust, you can have that conversation pretty much in any environment, if the trust is there.
Sure, right. But from the architectural standpoint, there are things also that connote trust that make you feel more calm and safe.
Definitely, absolutely.
And
The
I would think,
environment.
regardless of whether you're having an argument or not, we would
Sure.
want
Oh yes,
things in our conscious home.
that's right. Clutter creates static in the mind, and can trigger cortisol and stress hormone. Plants, green growing things, particularly when we see three different shades of green, is going to reverse that physiological process and create peace. The auditory cues, not always the same, because just like people
Mm,
have a taste of music, a trickling fountain for one person might be exactly right, but another person, not that trickling fountains aren't good. Japanese have perfected it to where they're actually tuning the sound. They can
yeah,
change the volume and the shapes of the rocks so that they have different notes. Because one person, that particular tuning of that fountain rubs them the wrong way. And
yeah,
so people might have different expectations or requirements, of a
yeah,
fountain for it to be soothing for them. So that's not an easy fix. You can't just get a little corner fountain that you found on Amazon for $49 and plug it in and be like, oh, we're going to have peace in the home now. Maybe, but
right.
that's an experiment.
Yeah,
So the workbook, if you just have one person in the household do the workbook, that's great. But if everyone in the household will do the workbook,
yeah,
that's so much more better, because now as a designer, I have the opportunity to look and objectively read these things. I'm not emotionally attached here, right? I want
right.
you to live happily ever after. I want the best for you. I'm going to look at these things and say, okay, here's what this person says is valuable to them. Here, let's prioritize. I'll ask a few more questions. What does that mean when they said that? And then we can look at these things, and I can look for the ways to have them go like this.
Yeah,
Maybe we have to leave a few things out, but those are easy to do without when I know I'm getting this and this and this. And those things are going to integrate very nicely. And so we can create a real win there. Even the kids, do it, if you got kids, you don't have to do the whole thing. Just do some of it, because I want to know. It's great, And so the more people do the workbook, the better, because you don't want just one person driving the whole
Deciding. Right,
style,
right, right.
the entire
Yeah, I'd
home.
end up with a house full of cardboard. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, and the questions in there are very thought provoking, and just even asking yourself, like, well, what are your highest values, and what's a way that you could bring that one value into this space?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If abundance is something that you're trying to cultivate, how
Mm-hmm.
can you create that in your space?
So evidence of abundance shows up differently for different people. So for one person, abundance might be, I have 15 different kinds of shampoo available to me in my bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
I can use a different shampoo every day of the week for 2 weeks before I repeat. And the pH is always changing, the recipe is changing. I never smell the same. Life is always interesting. The variety is abundance for me. But another person may walk in, look at that and go, holy cow, this place is a freaking mess. Who needs 15 bottles of shampoo? That doesn't represent abundance to them. To
Yeah.
them, abundance represents having the one bottle of shampoo. They've tried them all. This is the one that works. And what they have is just this vast, clear space with no clutter. It's absolutely minimalist. And that for them feels like the opportunity for them to grow and expand into this. So abundance
Mm,
for them is
yeah.
a simplification rather than a choice, rather than a buffet of variety. And so that's another personal question. And so in the workbooks, if you say abundance, if you don't elaborate on that, my follow-up question as the architect is going to say, what does that look like for you? How does abundance show up for you? When you're feeling abundant, what does that mean? You say, oh, well, I'm going to put on all of these things. And it's like, okay, abundance for you is, for one person, might be additive, but for another person might be subtractive or reductive.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying on this podcast when I talk about intuition. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is figuring out what's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
So pointing out that it's like, yeah, well, that might be right for so and so or such, or that might be all the rave right now, or whatever
Yeah.
it is. But is whatever you're about to, in this case, purchase or decorate, in other cases, say, do, be, whatever, is that right for you? As opposed to what you think the law of the court of the world says, it should be or it shouldn't be. And I think, sometimes we grow up in homes too, and it's like, oh, there should never be a TV in the living room because, you just didn't grow up that way. Like that should not happen. It becomes like this internal law in
Mm-hmm.
your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yeah, but how is this the setup of your family? Like, are
Yeah.
movies super important to you? Is that where your family time is? It comes back to what is right for you, which I think is really sometimes getting to that is all about being more consciously aware and not sort of automatically going through the motions.
That's right. I really try to work with people so they're not just doing what they expect or what tradition is. It's okay to do tradition. It's okay to do what you expect because that's the way you were raised and that's what it looked like, if that's what you want. I just want you to choose it intentionally rather than default.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's perfect. That's
Mm-hmm.
a perfect spot to end on as well. So I do really recommend this book and workbook to people who are looking to just create a more conscious space, because the questions really are intriguing and things, I wasn't really even thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you like to direct people to get in touch with you or buy that
Sure.
book and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff?
So the book is available. You can order it. You can go to any local bookstore and ask them to order you in a copy if you want a physical copy in your hand. It's also available online, Barnes & Noble or Amazon. But you can also get it on my website, conscioushomedesign.com. The thing is, on my website, the only place you can get the workbook is on my website. It's not available anywhere else. And so if you're thinking about actually getting the workbook, then go to conscioushomedesign.com and sign up for that. I think I've got a bundle. It's the book, the audiobook version, if you like to listen to book on tape, and the workbook is like $47. It's instant digital download, so you can get it right away. For a physical copy, it's more, but I'll sign it and mail it off to you, and you'll also get the digital immediately. And also, if you want to pick my brain, there's a contact me form on there, and you can set up a private consultation with me. I do work all over the country, coast to coast, top to bottom, and even internationally sometimes as well. So I'm happy to help anyone with their project, small or large. Go ahead, reach out, conscioushomedesign.com. Thanks for having me on the show, Abby. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you bring and your insights.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll put all those links in the show notes too. Thanks so much for being here.